Welcome back to Market on Close. I'm Sam Vitus, live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It's time now for overlooked stocks, and shares of Jinko Solar rallying to its highest level in over a year after it reported improving quarter-over-quarter profitability and rising momentum in its energy storage business. So I'm joined by Tsilis to get us across this one. Senior markets correspondent. So Jinko Solar rallying today. I can see about 13% higher right now off the back of this report card. Talk us through it and what we're seeing as far as the reaction in the stock today, George.
Yeah, I think, Sam, if you look at the context of the market, there's clearly an energy shortage or electricity shortage. There's actually quite a few data centers that are fully built that are actually open because of electricity shortages. So if you look across the board, there's been obviously some huge pickup in alternative energy. Some of those modular nuclear reactor companies like Oklo, for instance, but they haven't generated any revenue. But behind the scenes, the traditional solar businesses that are utility grade names, companies like Jinko Solar, for example, are actually performing quite well in this market. And Jinko is actually one of the dominant players in the solar industry space when it comes down to power distribution, solar wafers and modules, but also integration across the board and manufacturing globally. They actually sell their products not just in China, which actually has very large support from the Chinese government to deploy energy storage solutions. But Jinko's actually been selling and producing their panels and technologies across the Middle East, all across Asia, as well as Latin America. Now, they posted some pretty good numbers when you look at the context of the EPS. They lost $2.01 on an adjusted basis per share. That was in line in estimates. Sales were actually down. If you look at them at $2.27 billion, they actually missed by about $425 million. And those numbers were down about 10% sequentially, quarter over quarter, about 34% year over year. But if you look at their order book as they declared going into 2026, they're expecting about a 90% increase in total orders going forward. And in fact, if you look at the consensus analyst estimates for sales, just this year, they're estimating somewhere around $10.4 billion, but next year, for the full fiscal year in sales, and then this also corresponds to the order book pickup, they're expecting around $14.66 billion. So just the sales number alone is estimated to be around 42% year-over-year growth. So it seems like a lot of the energy storage economics are improving across the board in places like China, the United States. If you look at First Solar as well as a corollary company to Jinko, they've actually performed quite well. And in fact, Tesla, their automobile sales were actually not very good at all year over year, but they did denote in their conference call that their energy storage business was one bright spot.
Yeah, certainly the energy storage business has been managing to offset some of the weakness they've seen in those modules, as you say, which is basically another word for a solar panel. But just talk to us about how important that improvement is, certainly in the margins, the profitability here, because obviously we've seen these price wars over in China, these whole concern about overcapacity, particularly when it comes to renewable energy. I mean, I was talking about how some of these solar panels were being used as garden fences in Germany last year because they were that cheap. Obviously, the Beijing government has been cracking down on this and trying to sort things out as far as some of this overcapacity in the EV space when it comes to some of the renewables as well, because there's been a lot of companies that have actually gone bankrupt, basically shut down, delisted as a result of this. So how important is this for Jinko Solar?
So I think there's two markets or end markets that I'll focus on in the solar space. That's the residential solar space as well as the utility solar space. And I think utility solar names, companies like First Solar and Jinko. Jinko actually has sort of a mix between residential and utility grade solar installations. The end markets for those utility grade modules and technologies are basically public sectors like local utilities, major governments like the Chinese government, which allocates capital towards utility grade projects, as well as solar storage solutions. Now, these businesses basically have huge end markets and deployments, and essentially the residential solar market had become extremely saturated. Prices were depressed, and in fact, the residential solar market demand is still depressed as well. So you have to kind of decipher or separate the utility grade names from the residential names. And I think that the utility aspects of the solar market is where the economics are improving. Because again, the end markets are in huge demand, prices are firm, and local utility companies will pay a premium for installations because they're using taxpayer funds. So the residential solar market is really, I think, where the excess supply and actually decreased demand is. And that's been unfortunate for a lot of the other names, and many of the names have actually gone bankrupt. But nonetheless, the unit economics seems to be improving based on consensus estimates for Jinko, like I said, going forward. And one of the things I did also notice is if you look at 2026 EPS, they are expecting $1.60 in adjusted profit, and that's compared to $7.25 loss of this year. So the economics, based on estimates, both in sales and earnings, are improving. And that could be, again, based on some of the factors I mentioned just a moment ago in the utility aspects of energy solutions.
Yeah, good distinction. Thanks so much for putting it into context. A good look at Jinko Solar today, rallying off the back of its earnings at 13%. Thanks so much for that, George Tsilis.